I was standing at the podium in front of 300 sales professionals at the National Sales Excellence Conference in Seattle, feeling confident about presenting our Florida region's 43% quarterly increase, when my phone buzzed against the podium. The screen lit up with a text from my manager, Sandra. "Flight home canceled. Figure it out yourself. Conference budget exceeded." My heart stopped beating for what felt like an eternity as I stared at those words, realizing I was stranded 3,000 miles from home with no return ticket, while the entire audience waited expectantly for me to continue my presentation about success. The words on my phone screen burned into my vision, but somehow I managed to maintain my composure and finish the presentation. My hands trembled slightly as I clicked through the remaining slides, but my voice stayed steady while my mind raced with panic. How was I supposed to get home to Tampa from Seattle with barely $300 in my checking account? 3 days earlier, everything had seemed perfect. I was Brittany Collins, Regional Sales Director for MedTech Solutions, and this conference represented the biggest opportunity of my 6-year career. Our CEO, Marcus Thompson, had personally selected me to present our remarkable sales figures to industry leaders from across the country. It was the kind of visibility that could launch my career to the next level. My manager, Sandra, had insisted on handling all the travel arrangements herself. She claimed it was standard protocol for senior presentations, and I trusted her completely. Sandra was 45 years old, had been with the company for 8 years, and always portrayed herself as a mentor figure. She wore her authority like a carefully tailored suit, and spoke with the confidence of someone who had navigated corporate politics successfully. But from the moment I arrived in Seattle, strange things started happening. The hotel claimed they had no reservation under my name, forcing me to pay for a room with my personal credit card. The rental car agency insisted my booking had been canceled, leaving me to rely on expensive rideshare services. Most disturbing of all, the presentation materials I had carefully prepared and shipped ahead were missing from the conference's delivery area. During the conference's opening sessions, I overheard concerning conversations. Other attendees mentioned they had heard I might not be presenting after all. Some seemed confused about my role entirely, asking if I was just an assistant accompanying the real presenter. Each time I corrected them politely, but a growing sense of unease settled in my stomach. Despite these obstacles, I had managed to recreate my presentation from memory, working until 2 in the morning in my hotel room. When I finally took the stage this morning, everything went perfectly. The audience was engaged, asking thoughtful questions about our sales strategies. I noticed Jennifer Hayes, the Vice President of Sales, taking detailed notes and nodding approvingly during my key points. Throughout the conference, Sandra had been sending odd text messages, claiming she was dealing with urgent matters back in Tampa. Each message seemed more dramatic than the last, describing crises that supposedly required her immediate attention. Now, staring at this devastating message about my canceled flight, pieces of a horrible puzzle began clicking into place. After excusing myself from the post-presentation networking session, I found a quiet corner of the conference center and opened my email with shaking fingers. What I discovered there made my blood run cold. There was a flight confirmation email, but not for tomorrow as I expected. Sandra had rebooked my return flight for next month, not next week. The original booking showed a first-class ticket home for tomorrow evening, but the new confirmation showed a basic economy seat 32 days from now. But that was not the worst discovery. Scrolling through my emails, I found something that made me physically ill. Sandra had used the company credit card to book herself a vacation package to Hawaii, charging it under conference travel expenses and using the exact amount that my canceled first-class ticket would have cost. The resort booking confirmation showed dates starting tomorrow, the same day I was supposed to fly home. The realization hit me like a physical blow. This was not some budget emergency or corporate oversight. Sandra had deliberately stranded me on the opposite side of the country, while she enjoyed a tropical vacation paid for with money meant to get me home safely. I stumbled to a quiet seating area near the conference center's floor-to-ceiling windows, my legs barely supporting me as the full weight of Sandra's betrayal sank in. The Seattle skyline stretched out before me, beautiful and utterly unreachable, a reminder of just how far I was from home and safety. My first instinct was to call Sandra directly, but each attempt went straight to voicemail. Her outgoing message had been changed to claim she was dealing with emergency family matters and would respond to urgent communications as soon as possible. The cruel irony was not lost on me. I was experiencing the emergency, and she was the one causing it. I checked my personal bank account on my phone, hoping against hope that I had forgotten about some savings. The balance showed exactly $287.34. My credit cards were nearly maxed out from recent medical bills for my diabetic mother, whose insulin costs had skyrocketed over the past few months. There was simply no way I could afford a last-minute flight home, especially not during peak travel season. The hotel situation added another layer of desperation. When I called the front desk, they confirmed that my room was only authorized through tonight. There was no approval for extension, and the conference rate I had been promised was nowhere in their system. Extending my stay would cost over $200 per night, money I absolutely did not have. Feeling desperate for answers, I called Tracy Martinez, my assistant back in Tampa. Tracy was 26 years old, brilliant with technology, and had always been completely trustworthy. When she answered, I could hear the strain in her voice immediately. "Brittany, thank God you called," Tracy said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Something really weird is happening here. Sandra's been acting strange all week, and I think you need to know some things." What Tracy told me next shattered my understanding of my professional life completely. For the past 3 months, Sandra had been systematically intercepting my emails, responding to important communications before I ever saw them. She had been taking credit for major sales wins that I had personally negotiated, presenting them to upper management as her own achievements. "She told Mr. Thompson that you were unreliable and considering leaving the company," Tracy explained, her voice tight with anger. "She said you had been bad-mouthing company policies and could not be trusted with sensitive client relationships." The betrayal went even deeper. 3 of my biggest clients, 2 accounts that represented nearly 40% of my annual commission, had been quietly transferred to what Sandra called her personal portfolio. She had told these clients that I was being reassigned and that she would be their primary contact moving forward. Tracy had discovered even more disturbing information by accessing shared company files while Sandra was supposedly handling her family emergency. Conference colleagues had been told that I was just filling in for the real presenter, and that Sandra would be giving the actual presentation via video conference call later in the week. But the most devastating revelation was about the promotion I had been working toward for 2 years. The vice president of regional sales position that I thought I was being considered for, Sandra had been positioning herself as the ideal candidate, using my work and accomplishments as evidence of her leadership abilities. "She's been planning this for months," Tracy whispered urgently. "I found emails between her and someone in HR discussing your performance issues and attitude problems. Brittany, they're building a case to fire you." My hands were shaking so violently that I could barely hold the phone. Everything I had worked for, every success I thought I had earned, had been systematically stolen and weaponized against me. Sandra had not just canceled my flight home, she had been destroying my entire career one piece at a time. Tracy sent me screenshots of the evidence she had gathered, and as I scrolled through them, I realized this conference trip was meant to be the final blow. Sandra had intended for me to fail publicly, to return home humiliated and weakened, only to find my employment terminated for abandoning my responsibilities. The timeline was becoming clear now. Tomorrow morning, the quarterly board meeting would take place where the VP promotion would be officially announced. Sandra had planned to be sitting in that meeting, fresh from her Hawaii vacation, ready to accept the position that should have been mine, while I was stranded and powerless on the other side of the country. But then Tracy told me something that made my blood freeze in my veins. Sandra was about to send a company-wide email announcing my resignation due to personal reasons and inability to handle professional responsibilities. The email was scheduled to be automatically sent in exactly 1 hour and 47 minutes, while I was trapped 3,000 miles away with no way to defend myself or explain what had really happened. The hotel lobby felt like it was spinning around me as Tracy's words sank in. Less than 2 hours remained before Sandra's email would destroy my professional reputation permanently. But Tracy was not finished with her revelations, and what she told me next revealed a conspiracy far more sinister than I had imagined. "Brittany, there's more," Tracy said, her voice barely audible. "I accessed Sandra's computer while she's been out, and I found communications with Dale Murphy from Human Resources. They've been working together on this for months." Dale Murphy. I knew him as a friendly face in HR, someone who always smiled and asked about my mother's health during our brief hallway encounters. The thought that he had been actively sabotaging me felt like a betrayal by a trusted family friend. Tracy explained that Dale had been Sandra's college roommate at Florida State University, and they had maintained a close personal relationship throughout their careers. Together, they had created a systematic approach to destroying high-performing employees who threatened Sandra's advancement. The evidence Tracy had uncovered was staggering. Dale had created false documentation in my personnel file, including fabricated write-ups for attendance issues that had never occurred. The dates he chose were particularly cruel, days when I had taken approved time off to care for my diabetic mother during medical emergencies. "There are fake client complaints in your file," Tracy continued, her anger evident even through the phone. "Completely made-up stories about you being rude to customers, missing important calls, failing to follow up on leads. None of it ever happened, but it's all documented with official timestamps and Dale's signature." The conspiracy included twisted records of conversations that had been taken completely out of context. A discussion I had with Sandra about improving our client onboarding process had been documented as insubordination and resistance to management directives. A suggestion I made during a team meeting about updating our software systems was recorded as undermining company decisions and creating workplace discord. But Tracy's most devastating discovery was that this was not Sandra and Dale's first victim. 2 other high-performing employees had been systematically destroyed using identical methods over the past 3 years. Both had been isolated, sabotaged, and eventually fired for cause just weeks before they would have received major bonuses or promotions. Jennifer Walsh was in accounting, Tracy explained, reading from the files she had accessed. She discovered a discrepancy in expense reports and was preparing to report it when Sandra started documenting performance problems. Jennifer was fired for allegedly falsifying her timesheets, but the evidence was completely manufactured. The second victim was Michael Chen from the marketing department. He had developed a revolutionary social media campaign that increased brand engagement by 60%. But Sandra convinced upper management that he was taking credit for work done by his team. Michael was terminated for leadership failures and dishonesty, and his innovative campaign was attributed to Sandra's strategic oversight. The pattern was becoming horrifyingly clear. Sandra identified threats to her advancement, enlisted Dale's help to create false documentation, then systematically destroyed their reputations while absorbing their accomplishments into her own portfolio. Tracy had also discovered financial irregularities that went far beyond stealing credit for my work. Sandra had been redirecting portions of my commission payments to something called administrative processing fees, which appeared to go directly into accounts she controlled. Over the past 18 months, she had stolen nearly $15,000 that should have been mine. The conference sabotage had been planned with meticulous detail. Sandra had never actually shipped my presentation materials, knowing I would be forced to recreate everything from memory under extreme stress. She had intentionally provided incorrect travel dates to the hotel and rental car company, ensuring I would face obstacles from the moment I arrived. But the most personally painful discovery was that Sandra had been spreading vicious rumors about my private life throughout the company. Dale had helped her plant stories about alleged substance abuse problems, claims that I was mentally unstable, and suggestions that my mother's medical issues were causing me to be unreliable and emotionally volatile. "She told people you were drinking at lunch meetings," Tracy said, her voice tight with fury. "She claimed you had been making inappropriate advances toward male colleagues and that HR was monitoring you for harassment complaints. None of it is true, but people believe it because it's coming from your manager." Dale had also helped Sandra access my work computer remotely, deleting important client communications and corrupting files I needed for major presentations. They had timed these technical sabotages to coincide with critical deadlines, making me appear incompetent and disorganized. The master plan was reaching its crescendo. While I was stranded in Seattle, appearing to have abandoned my responsibilities, Sandra would return from her Hawaii vacation refreshed and ready to step into the VP role. The resignation email would explain my absence as a mental breakdown, and by the time I managed to return to Tampa, my reputation would be so thoroughly destroyed that no one would believe my side of the story. Tracy's voice became urgent as she delivered the final piece of devastating news. "Brittany, the resignation email is scheduled to send in 93 minutes. Once that goes out to the entire company, including our biggest clients, there's no way to undo the damage. Sandra will have won completely." I sat in that hotel lobby, surrounded by the quiet bustle of successful business travelers, feeling more alone and powerless than I had ever felt in my life. But as Tracy's words sank in, something deep inside me began to change. The fear and desperation were still there, but they were being joined by something else, a burning sense of injustice that demanded action. The Seattle Conference Center buzzed with networking conversations around me, but I felt completely isolated in my crisis. 93 minutes until Sandra's email would destroy everything I had worked for. My career, my reputation, my financial stability, all of it hung in the balance while I sat 3,000 miles from home with less than $300 to my name. But then I remembered something that cut through my panic like a beacon of hope. Jennifer Hayes, the vice president of sales, had been genuinely engaged during my presentation. She had asked specific, thoughtful questions about our customer retention strategies and had taken detailed notes throughout my entire talk. More importantly, she had seemed impressed by my responses and had mentioned wanting to discuss regional expansion opportunities. Jennifer was here at the conference, and she was high enough in the corporate hierarchy to potentially stop Sandra's scheme. It was a desperate long shot, but it was the only chance I had to save my career before that devastating email went out. I gathered every piece of evidence Tracy had sent me, organizing the screenshots and documentation into a coherent timeline on my phone. My hands were still trembling, but my mind was becoming clearer with each passing minute. I had the truth on my side, and I had proof of Sandra's systematic sabotage. The conference networking reception was taking place in the hotel's grand ballroom, filled with hundreds of sales professionals sharing drinks and business cards. I spotted Jennifer near the far corner, engaged in conversation with two other executives I recognized from the morning sessions. My heart pounded as I approached her, every step feeling like I was walking toward either salvation or complete professional suicide. Jennifer was an imposing woman in her early 50s, with silver hair and the kind of presence that commanded respect in any room. She wore a navy blue suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary, and she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had earned her position through decades of excellence. "Miss Hayes?" I said, my voice somehow steadier than I felt. "I'm Brittany Collins from the Tampa office. I presented this morning about our regional sales growth." Jennifer turned toward me with a polite smile that seemed genuine. "Of course, Brittany. Excellent presentation. I was particularly impressed by your customer retention metrics. 43% growth in a challenging market is remarkable." "Thank you," I said, then took a deep breath and made the leap that would either save my career or end it. "Miss Hayes, I need to speak with you about something urgent. It's about my manager, Sandra Walsh, and a situation that's happening right now while we're at this conference." Jennifer's expression shifted slightly, becoming more focused and serious. "What kind of situation?" I pulled out my phone and began showing her the evidence methodically, starting with Sandra's text message about my canceled flight and the Hawaii booking confirmation. Jennifer's eyebrows rose as she read Sandra's message, and her expression darkened considerably when she saw the vacation booking charged to company expenses. "This is quite serious," Jennifer said quietly, her voice taking on a professional edge. "You're saying your manager deliberately stranded you here and used your travel budget for her personal vacation?" "That's just the beginning," I replied, then showed her the falsified HR documents, the redirected commissions, and the pattern of systematic sabotage that Tracy had uncovered. Jennifer studied each piece of evidence carefully, asking specific questions about dates and dollar amounts. When I explained about the resignation email scheduled to go out in less than an hour, Jennifer's demeanor changed completely. "Why are you telling me this instead of going through proper channels?" "Because in 57 minutes, I won't have a job to save, and Sandra will have won," I said, my voice gaining strength from desperation and determination. "You're the only person here with the authority to stop this before it's too late." Jennifer looked at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she said something that changed everything. "I've been investigating Sandra for 3 months. The world seemed to stop spinning around me." "What?" Jennifer glanced around the crowded reception, then gestured toward a quieter seating area near the hotel's massive windows overlooking Elliott Bay. Our corporate audit department flagged unusual expense patterns and suspicious client reassignments coming from the Tampa office. Multiple high-value accounts being transferred without proper documentation, commission payments being redirected through administrative channels, and expense reports that didn't match submitted receipts. My legs felt weak as I followed her to the more private area. "You've been investigating her?" "For months," Jennifer confirmed, settling into a leather armchair and gesturing for me to sit across from her. "But we needed concrete proof of wrongdoing, not just financial irregularities. Corporate investigations require careful documentation and multiple sources of evidence." Jennifer explained that she had specifically requested my presence at this conference to observe my capabilities away from Sandra's direct influence. The company had suspected that Sandra was taking credit for work done by her subordinates, but they needed to see my actual skills and knowledge to confirm their suspicions. "Your presentation this morning was exceptional," Jennifer continued. "The level of detail about client relationships, the sophisticated understanding of market dynamics, the innovative retention strategies. That's not the work of someone Sandra described as unreliable and incompetent." The investigation had uncovered evidence of Sandra's pattern of behavior with other employees, but they had been missing the crucial elements that would support criminal charges rather than just termination. They suspected embezzlement and systematic harassment, but proving it required catching Sandra in the act of active sabotage. This conference was designed to be a test, Jennifer admitted. We expected Sandra might try to undermine your performance, but frankly, we didn't anticipate anything this blatant or cruel. She pulled out her own phone and showed me a series of text messages and emails. We've been monitoring Sandra's corporate communications since the investigation began. We know about Dale Murphy's involvement, the falsified personnel records, and the financial irregularities. What we didn't have was proof of active, deliberate sabotage happening in real time. Jennifer's revelation was both vindicating and terrifying. The company had been building a case against Sandra, but they had been willing to use me as bait to catch her in the act. I felt simultaneously grateful for their investigation and disturbed that they had let me walk into Sandra's trap. The question now, Jennifer said, her voice becoming more direct, is whether you're willing to officially cooperate with our investigation. We can absolutely get you home safely and deal with Sandra, but we need you to be willing to testify about what's happened and provide formal statements about her behavior. I thought about the resignation email ticking toward its scheduled send time, about my mother's medical bills, about my dream of advancement being systematically destroyed by someone I had trusted. What do you need me to do? Jennifer smiled for the first time since our conversation began. But it was not a warm expression. It was the smile of someone who was about to deliver justice. Actually, she said, checking her watch, there's something else you should know. Your presentation impressed our CEO so much that we were planning to offer you Sandra's position, but we needed to see if you could handle adversity and fight back when necessary. Congratulations, Brittany. You just passed the test. The revelation that this had all been a test left me reeling, but there was no time to process the emotions. Jennifer immediately shifted into executive mode, pulling out her phone and making rapid-fire calls to mobilize the corporate response. Legal needs to be looped in immediately, she said to whoever answered her first call. We're moving forward with the Sandra Walsh situation tonight. Yes, tonight. We have real-time evidence of active sabotage and embezzlement. While Jennifer coordinated with the legal team, I felt a transformation happening inside me. The fear and desperation were being replaced by something much more powerful, a sense of purpose and determination. Sandra had tried to destroy me, but instead she had given me the opportunity to discover just how strong I really was. Jennifer's assistant, a sharp woman named Patricia, who had flown in from the New York headquarters, arrived within minutes, carrying a laptop and a stack of legal documents. Corporate counsel is standing by for a conference call, she reported efficiently. They need to review the evidence and get formal statements before we proceed. The next hour unfolded like a carefully orchestrated legal operation. Patricia set up a makeshift command center in one of the hotel's private conference rooms, complete with recording equipment and secure video conferencing capabilities. Jennifer explained that everything we did needed to be properly documented to ensure Sandra faced both termination and criminal charges. The legal team walked me through each piece of evidence Tracy had gathered, asking detailed questions about dates, times, and specific incidents. They were particularly interested in the financial theft, the redirected commissions, and fraudulent expense reports that showed clear criminal intent rather than just poor management. We need to coordinate with your assistant Tracy in Tampa, explained David Chen, the head corporate counsel who joined us via video conference. She's been instrumental in gathering evidence, but we need to ensure she's protected from retaliation while we finalize the case. Jennifer arranged for a security detail to be dispatched to the Tampa office immediately. Tracy would be escorted by corporate security while she formally preserved all digital evidence and made her official statement to HR investigators who were not connected to Dale Murphy. But then Jennifer revealed something that made my blood run cold. "We have reason to believe Sandra is actually here in Seattle. Hotel records show she checked in yesterday under her maiden name, Sandra Peterson. She's been staying 2 floors below you, monitoring your movements." The security footage Patricia pulled up on her laptop confirmed our worst fears. Sandra had been at the conference the entire time, watching from the back of the room during my presentation, following me through the hotel lobby, and positioning herself to witness my public humiliation firsthand. "She wanted to see your reaction when you received that text message," Jennifer explained grimly. "She planned to return to Tampa as the hero who covered for an unstable employee, having witnessed your breakdown personally. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. Sandra had not just wanted to destroy my career, she had wanted to savor my suffering, to watch me crumble under the weight of her betrayal." The conference badge records showed she had attended sessions under a fake registration, probably using a credit card in her maiden name to avoid detection. But her presence in Seattle also provided us with an opportunity. Instead of simply stopping the resignation email and dealing with Sandra remotely, we could confront her publicly and ensure that her professional reputation was destroyed as thoroughly as she had tried to destroy mine. Jennifer and the legal team developed a strategic plan. They would allow Sandra's resignation email to send as scheduled, but simultaneously they would copy all major company executives, board members, and key clients on a comprehensive response that included all evidence of her fraud and sabotage. "We want her to think she's succeeded," Jennifer explained. "Let her believe the email went out as planned. Let her think you're trapped and helpless. Then we'll reveal the truth in a way that ensures her behavior is exposed to everyone who matters in this industry." Patricia worked with the hotel's event coordination team to arrange for the confrontation to take place during the conference's closing reception. Key industry leaders would be present, along with executives from competing companies and influential figures whose opinions could make or break someone's career in medical device sales. The plan was both elegant and devastating. Sandra would approach me with fake sympathy about my travel situation, not knowing that corporate security would be recording everything and that dozens of witnesses would see her lies exposed in real time. As we prepared for the evening's events, Jennifer shared more details about the investigation that had been building against Sandra. The pattern of abuse went back nearly 4 years, with multiple victims whose careers had been systematically destroyed. Dale Murphy's involvement had been suspected for months, but proving the conspiracy required catching them in active coordination. Jennifer Walsh, who used to work in accounting, has agreed to testify about what Sandra and Dale did to her, Jennifer explained. Michael Chen from marketing has also come forward with documentation of how his work was stolen and his reputation destroyed. Your case is the final piece we needed to pursue criminal charges. The financial investigation had revealed that Sandra's embezzlement totaled over $100,000 across multiple victims and fraudulent schemes. She had created fake vendor accounts, redirected commission payments, and charged personal expenses to company accounts for years. But as I listened to the scope of Sandra's crimes, I realized this was about more than just my career or even her other victims. This was about creating a system where workplace bullies could not thrive, where systematic harassment would be met with serious consequences, and where future employees would be protected from the kind of abuse I had endured. My phone buzzed with a text message from Tracy. Email sent. Everyone in company received it. Sandra's vacation photos already posting on social media from Hawaii. She has no idea what's coming. Jennifer checked her watch and smiled grimly. The closing reception starts in 20 minutes. Are you ready to show Sandra Walsh what real strength looks like? I thought about my mother back in Tampa, about Tracy risking her job to help me, about Jennifer Walsh and Michael Chen whose careers had been destroyed, about future employees who might face similar abuse. The fear was still there, but it was completely overwhelmed by determination. I'm ready, I said, and for the first time in months, I truly meant it. The closing reception was in full swing when Sandra made her entrance. I was positioned near the hotel's panoramic windows overlooking Puget Sound, with Jennifer and several other executives positioned strategically around the room. Corporate security had discreetly stationed themselves at key locations, and Patricia was recording everything from multiple angles. Sandra looked exactly like someone returning from a relaxing Hawaiian vacation, tanned, refreshed, and radiating confidence. She wore a cream-colored blazer that probably cost more than my monthly car payment, and she moved through the crowded reception with the self-assured stride of someone who believed her plan had worked perfectly. I watched her approach, my heart pounding but my resolve unshakable. She had orchestrated this entire scenario to witness my humiliation and desperation. Instead, she was walking into the most devastating professional confrontation of her life. "Brittany!" Sandra called out with perfectly practiced concern as she reached me. "Oh my goodness, how are you handling everything? I am so sorry about the travel situation. When the family emergency came up, I tried to reach you immediately." Her performance was Oscar-worthy. The worried expression, the sympathetic tone, the way she placed her hand on my arm as if comforting a distressed colleague. If I had not known the truth about her Hawaii vacation and systematic sabotage, I might have actually believed her concern was genuine. "Sandra," I said calmly, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "Thank you so much for teaching me so much about leadership over these past few months. I have learned more from you than I ever imagined possible." Sandra's expression flickered with confusion for just a moment. She had expected tears, desperation, maybe even angry accusations. My calm gratitude clearly threw her off script. "Of course, sweetheart," she recovered quickly. "I know this has been difficult, but sometimes these things happen in business. The important thing is how we handle adversity." "You are absolutely right," I agreed, pulling out my phone. "It really is fascinating how people handle adversity. For instance, it is interesting that you managed to fly in from Tampa to help me despite the family emergency that kept you from answering my calls." Sandra's confidence wavered slightly, but she maintained her facade. "Well, once I got the immediate family situation handled, I knew I had to come help you get home safely. That is what good managers do for their team members." By now, a small crowd was gathering around our conversation. Jennifer had signaled other executives, and they were slowly moving closer to hear what was happening. Sandra seemed to interpret this as an audience for her heroic rescue narrative. "I brought all the travel documentation to sort this out," Sandra continued, reaching into her designer purse. "Sometimes these conference travel budgets get complicated, but I am confident we can get you home soon." "That is so thoughtful of you to handle my travel personally," I said, then began reading directly from my phone. "Especially since you took the time to send me such detailed updates about the situation. For instance, your text message that said, and I quote, 'Your return flight's canceled. Figure it out yourself. Conference budget exceeded.'" The color began draining from Sandra's face, but she tried to laugh it off. "Oh, that message sounds much harsher than I intended. You know how text messages can be misinterpreted. I was just trying to let you know about the budget constraints while I worked on solutions." "I completely understand," I replied, then read the next piece of evidence aloud. "And I especially appreciated how you kept me informed about the family emergency that required your immediate attention. Though, I have to say, The Maui Grand Resort's confirmation email for your 7-night vacation package was a bit confusing. The dates seemed to overlap with your family crisis. Sandra's carefully constructed composure began cracking. I don't know what you're talking about. There must be some mistake with those confirmations. Jennifer stepped forward at that moment, her presence commanding immediate attention from everyone within 20 feet. Actually, Sandra, there's no mistake. We have quite comprehensive documentation of your activities over the past few days. The recognition hit Sandra like a physical blow. Jennifer Hayes, the vice president she had been hoping to impress with her management of the Brittany situation, was clearly aligned with me rather than her. The political calculation that had driven Sandra's entire scheme was collapsing in real time. "Miss Hayes," Sandra stammered, trying to regain her footing, "I think there may be some misunderstanding here. Brittany has been under a lot of stress lately, and I am concerned that she might be misrepresenting some situations. The only misrepresentation here is your claim about a family emergency," Jennifer replied coolly, then gestured to Patricia, who approached with a tablet displaying financial records. "These are your expense reports for the past week, Sandra. Hotel charges in Maui, restaurant bills from beachfront resorts, and spa services. All charged to Brittany's conference travel budget while she was stranded here in Seattle." The crowd around us had grown larger, and I could see other conference attendees pulling out their phones to record what was clearly becoming a major confrontation. Industry colleagues from competing companies, potential clients, and influential figures in medical device sales were all witnessing Sandra's exposure. Sandra's desperation became palpable as she realized the scope of what was happening. "This is all some kind of misunderstanding. I can explain everything. Dale Murphy in HR can verify that all my actions were properly authorized." "Dale Murphy was arrested 3 hours ago," Jennifer announced, her voice carrying clearly through the reception area. "Corporate security is currently searching his office and seizing his computers. We have evidence of systematic fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit workplace harassment." The finality of Jennifer's words hit Sandra like a tsunami. Her elaborate scheme was not just exposed, it was completely destroyed, along with her career, her reputation, and her freedom. The vacation in Hawaii that was supposed to celebrate her promotion had become evidence of her crimes. But Sandra was not finished. In her desperation, she made one final attempt to salvage something from the wreckage of her plan. "You don't understand," she said, her voice rising with panic. "Brittany has been manipulating all of you. She doesn't deserve any of this success. She's been using her personal relationships to advance her career, and she's not qualified for the responsibilities you're considering giving her." The accusation hung in the air for a moment, and I felt a flash of the old fear and self-doubt. But then I remembered everything I had learned about myself over the past few hours. I had faced the worst betrayal imaginable and emerged stronger. I had gathered evidence, built alliances, and fought back with truth and determination. "Actually," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the now silent reception area, "I think I am exactly qualified for new responsibilities. I have learned to recognize systematic abuse, to gather evidence methodically, to build strategic alliances, and to fight back against injustice even when I am terrified." Those seem like excellent qualifications for leadership. Jennifer smiled, the first genuine, warm smile I had seen from her all day. I could not agree more. At that moment, hotel security approached Sandra, followed by 2 Seattle police officers. The formal arrest warrant had been issued based on the evidence gathered throughout the day, and Sandra's vacation in paradise was about to become a very different kind of stay in a government facility. As the handcuffs were placed on Sandra's wrists, she made one final, desperate attempt to maintain her narrative. "This is not fair," she shouted, her voice carrying throughout the reception area. "Brittany doesn't deserve any of this." But her words were captured by the conference's audio system and broadcast to the entire closing session. 300 sales professionals heard Sandra's final confession that her actions had been driven by jealousy and a belief that I did not deserve success. As Sandra was led away by police, the reception erupted in applause. But it was not applause for Sandra's downfall. It was applause for the courage it had taken to stand up to systematic abuse and fight back with truth and evidence. The standing ovation that followed Sandra's arrest was the most surreal moment of my life. 300 sales professionals from across the country were applauding not just my courage, but the principle that workplace bullies should face serious consequences for their actions. Jennifer immediately stepped forward to address the crowd that had gathered around the dramatic confrontation. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, her voice carrying the authority of her executive position, "what you have witnessed tonight represents everything our industry should stand for: integrity, truth, and the courage to fight back against injustice." The immediate aftermath moved with stunning swiftness. CEO Marcus Thompson, who had been attending the conference's closing dinner, arrived within minutes of Sandra's arrest. He personally apologized to me in front of the entire reception, acknowledging that the company had failed to protect me from systematic abuse. "Brittany," he said, his voice carrying both regret and admiration, "I want to publicly offer you Sandra's position as regional sales manager, effective immediately. You have demonstrated exactly the kind of leadership and character we need in our management team." The financial restoration was equally comprehensive. The company committed to reimbursing all stolen commissions, which totaled nearly $18,000 once the forensic accounting was completed. They also provided compensation for emotional distress and promised to cover any legal fees related to the criminal proceedings against Sandra and Dale. Jennifer personally arranged for me to be upgraded to first class for my flight home the next morning, with all expenses covered by the company's executive travel budget. But more importantly, she spent an hour discussing my vision for the regional sales team and my ideas for preventing similar abuse in the future. The industry recognition came immediately. Several competitors who had witnessed the confrontation approached me with job offers, recognizing my character and resilience under pressure. More significantly, the conference organizers asked me to speak at next year's event about workplace harassment and the importance of creating supportive professional environments. Tracy received the recognition she deserved for her courage and loyalty. I personally ensured she received both a promotion to Senior Administrative Coordinator and a substantial bonus for risking her job to help expose the truth. The bond we formed through this crisis became one of my most valued professional relationships. The investigation's aftermath revealed the full scope of Sandra and Dale's conspiracy. Jennifer Walsh and Michael Chen, the previous victims, received substantial settlements for wrongful termination. The company implemented new policies to prevent similar abuse, including anonymous reporting systems and regular audits of commission payments and expense reports. But beyond the professional vindication, this experience transformed me personally in ways I never could have imagined. I discovered that I possessed strength and courage I didn't know existed. When faced with the worst betrayal imaginable, I had not collapsed into victimhood. I had gathered evidence, built alliances, and fought back strategically and effectively. The relationship with my mother deepened through this crisis. When I called to tell her everything that had happened, her response was immediate and characteristic. "I raised you to be strong, Brittany. I am proud that you stood up for yourself and for other people who couldn't fight back." My new position as regional sales manager allowed me to implement policies that protected other employees from the kind of abuse I had endured. I created mentorship programs for junior staff, established clear channels for reporting harassment, and made sure that high-performing employees received recognition for their actual contributions. The criminal proceedings against Sandra and Dale moved swiftly through the courts. Both pled guilty to multiple felony charges, including embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy. Sandra received 3 years in federal prison, while Dale received 18 months. Both were required to pay substantial restitution to their victims. Industry colleagues respected my handling of the crisis with dignity and evidence, rather than emotional outbursts or revenge. The confrontation became a case study in business schools about ethical leadership and the importance of documentation when facing workplace abuse. 6 months later, I was promoted again to Vice President of Regional Operations, overseeing sales teams across the Southeast. Jennifer Hayes became my mentor and advocate, helping me develop the executive skills necessary for continued advancement. The most meaningful transformation was internal. I learned to trust my instincts when something felt wrong, rather than dismissing red flags or making excuses for inappropriate behavior. I developed the confidence to speak up immediately when I witnessed harassment or abuse of other employees. Looking back, I realized that staying silent in the face of injustice doesn't protect you. It only enables your abusers. Sometimes the scariest thing you can do is also the most necessary thing. When you stand up for yourself with truth and evidence, you're not just saving yourself, you're protecting everyone who comes after you. Real strength isn't about never being afraid. It's about doing what's right, even when you're terrified. And sometimes, the people trying to destroy you are actually giving you the opportunity to discover just how powerful you really are. The conference in Seattle had been intended as the final blow in Sandra's campaign to destroy my career. Instead, it became the launching pad for everything I had ever dreamed of achieving. More importantly, it taught me that fighting back against injustice, armed with truth, evidence, and courage, can transform both your own life and the lives of others who face similar battles. As I boarded my first-class flight home to Tampa that morning, looking out the airplane window at the Seattle skyline that had seemed so threatening just 24 hours earlier, I knew I would return to this city soon. But next time, I would come as a leader, a mentor, and an advocate for others who needed someone to stand up for them when they couldn't stand up for themselves. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where someone you trusted was secretly undermining you? How did you find the courage to fight back, and what did you learn about yourself in the process? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes sharing our experiences helps others recognize when they're facing similar challenges. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like to help others find it who might need to hear this message. Subscribe for more stories about finding strength in difficult situations, and share this with anyone who might be facing workplace harassment or betrayal. Together, we can create environments where bullies don't thrive and good people are protected and supported. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, you are stronger than you know. And truth, combined with courage, can overcome even the most systematic betrayal.